This is the time and date for further hearing in the matter of Fabius Township versus Mary Ann McLean. She was cited just in that name, Mary McLean. There are two file numbers, 2514660N and 2514670N. Two separate alleged violations of the township ordinances regarding an additional dwelling on a parcel of property and general nuisance. We had a hearing on October 29th when I took testimony and found that the defendants were in violation of both sections of the ordinance. The plaintiff township had provided a proposed compliance ordinance, which is quite harsh. And I was not prepared to enter that order. After the hearing, I said I needed more information and perhaps more argument. But Mr. Spiegel, I'm sure you've seen that proposed order. They are proposing that they shall remove the kitchen and bathroom from the barn and disconnect all gas and electric. Shall eliminate the use of the house as a 3 separate residential units. Anyway, obtain proper permits for power upgrades and sewer things, and there's a lot of stuff in that proposed order, which I have not entered. I was very pleased when I heard that Mr. Spiegel had filed an appearance on behalf of you. I told you that you guys needed a lawyer and one that does this sort of thing. I've told our other defendants the same thing. They may have some defenses and they can't see them. In another case I have, they've filed a bunch of pleadings and never served them on the other side. So I'm glad that you got representation. I asked the prosecutor or the plaintiff's attorney, Ms. Bishwent, whether she and Mr. Spiegel had talked, and she said they had. So I'll defer to you on behalf of the township. What's the current status here today?
Thank you, Honor. I did have the opportunity to speak with Mr. Spiegel in this matter. The township has, I guess, amended the requested compliance order. I did provide a copy of that to Mr. Spiegel. As opposed to the prior compliance order enforcing ordinances that the plaintiff, the township has requested. It is now simply down to, we are requesting that the main dwelling unit on the property is considered a single family home and cannot be rented out unless it is rented out in its entirety, not portions thereof. No person is permitted to live in or sleep in any accessory building, RV unit, or makeshift building. No RV unit, accessory building, or makeshift building may be rented out, and that the defendant, if the defendant is found in a violation of any of the above, the township shall file a motion in order to show cause why the defendant shall not be held in criminal contempt.
All right. I've also got percolating in here. Oh, that preceded this. That was filed in September. Mr. Spiegel, what's your position? I know you're a little late to the game here. A lot of things. My preference would have been you would have been here at the front end rather than the back end, but I'm glad you're here.
I appreciate that, Your Honor. Yes, as you said, I'm playing a little bit of catch up. I did listen to the whole 2 hours and 8 minutes of the hearing to try to figure out what has happened, what can be argued, what has been argued, etc. Yes, I appreciate her, and as much, and she's kind of pared back some of the things. That's what, when I first got that proposed order, it kind of scared me, and I think kind of raised your eyebrows a little bit about all the things they were asking to be done. So I appreciate, I do, even though we didn't quite get to an agreement, I do appreciate that they're paring that back somewhat. Our position, Your Honor, is a couple things, and I don't know how much of that, given that proposed order now, we have to talk about the main dwelling unit, but a couple things to point out. I am not sure that Your Honor was really caring about the evidence that was entered regarding the 2017 issue. I of course make note that there is a statute of limitations issue to the extent that that's being relied on in any fashion. I don't necessarily get the sense that the court is definitively relying on it, but it was entered into evidence. And so I do have to address, of course, under Township of Fraser versus Haney, we can't be looking back to 2017 for a violation that's happening in 2025. But I do think the court made note of, well, this notice was posted that you really shouldn't be using this dwelling. That's fair enough to make note of to the extent that occurred. Of course, my clients, maybe if they'd gotten lawyers you mentioned, would have gotten in and fought that issue back then. And just as you also said, maybe the enforcement brought back then would have helped clear up some of these issues as well. And again, I know the court was skeptical about tearing out those utilities. It sounds like maybe the township's backing down on that, but we're going to offer just a little bit of evidence about what is going on in the main house. We don't think it is the extent that they believe it is. And again, maybe it's a moot issue, but we'll keep it brief. There is one point I do think remains kind of contentious, though, Your Honor, and I do understand your ruling from last time, but this farm dwelling structure, I know you mentioned that you would take for granted that there were some permits obtained. We saw some of the permits, of course, in the previous hearing, but I don't think you'd seen all the permits. As I recall, you didn't provide the health department or one of the permits, I think that they believed had been attached to this structure was for a different structure on the property. So I do want to kind of make sure we get some evidence in about that and from Ms. McLean about what that structure really was back in 92, 93, because of course, if it was permitted back then, it's not a non-conforming use anymore. That's the thing I think we have to get down to. Now, I know there's been some issues about, well, it's a barn dwelling and are you accepting rent or is that not rent? I think Your Honor sagely pointed out there might be tax implications, not what we're here about today, et cetera. But I do think we at least want to get those permits and you get some testimony from Ms. McLean to understand what's going on. So the appropriate remedy, if any, as to this barn dwelling is crafted. Again, I do appreciate that they're not now asking to rip all that stuff out. But of course, if the use is permitted, it's not non-conforming. There's nothing to see here essentially. Or maybe if it's somewhat ambiguous because it's a farm dwelling, was it being used as a rental as opposed to a farm dwelling? I think you can craft appropriate relief that keeps it a barn dwelling and maybe addresses, I guess I'll call it sort of spoken concern of yours that, what is the relation of animals and livestock maybe to this building? What's going on with that? Fair question. I asked that myself when I first got involved. And so I think maybe to address that, you can maybe come up with a one that's still a bit narrower than maybe the township would like, but probably narrower than you're going to like too, but something that maybe works for everybody. So that's kind of the little bit of evidence we do want to put on today, Your Honor, before you make your final ruling as to what should the order be.
Thank you. I did provide counsel for both sides with a letter that had been given to me. I didn't know what it was. And someone brought it. And then by the time I opened it, it was too late. So I shared it with both parties. It was filed with the court file on December 11th. Ms. McLean and maybe her husband were going to different meetings and distributed this letter to people, and someone that got one of the letters brought it to me. So I shared it with everybody. I'll just read it. My husband and I built, own, and operate a farm in Fabius Township, Michigan since 1993. We built with permits, completed with inspections, and got occupancy permits for a living space, one of our buildings, as well as our Miles Kit home on our land. Housing farm workers in ag zone is allowed. They falsely claim we house 5 or more migrants. False. Never. Only local Americans. The township code inspector, Doug Kuhlman, has charged me alone and Mary McLean with numerous violations. My bond to appeal was $900 at St. Joseph County District Court. Luke Laurie, a magistrate, ruled we are not allowed a secondary residence weeks ago. Court with Judge Middleton on 10/29 was worse. Based on hearsay and outright lies, no decision yet from court as what township proposes violates my civil and constitutional rights. This essentially would end our ability to farm or survive without housing help. My husband is never mentioned. They have attacked me personally with warrants, inspections, and even my personal Facebook page. We are at wit's end. Senior citizens really need some help with this quickly. I will go before a judge again soon. Talk about some health issues. Please reach out with some help options. Thank you for your kind consideration. As Judge Middleton told us, if we can afford a motorhome, we can afford an attorney. It's not a '08, not real valuable, but for sale, ending our retirement dream of travel. So I'm not exactly sure what that was, but I saw it ex parte and shared it with everybody. On behalf of the township, Ms. Gushwant, does that cause you any concerns about my continued sitting on this case?
No, it does not.
Mr. Spiegel, does that raise any concerns for you?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right. I'm not exactly sure what it was, if it was solicitation for people to help hire a lawyer, if it worked. Well, good. As I indicated, there were 2 citations. There are a couple of different issues. One is the farm building with a very nice apartment in it. And the defendant claims that they were permitted. And the history goes back to previous township board members, John Niken and Eugene Dunlap, and things that were written on the back of a scrap of paper. And then the housing in the house, there's a very nice apartment in the lower level. There may be additional housing space on the upper level. And frankly, I didn't feel that the defendants were completely candid about who was what, whether these were rented or not. As a general rule, you can't have 2 residences on the same piece of property with the same address. And this issue has come up a number of times over the years where people put an apartment in a barn and rent it. Some of them have been deplorable. I had one in particular, it's one of the people that die of carbon monoxide poisoning, but some others. So generally that is not permitted, and it isn't permitted in Fabius Township. The other issue is who all was in the house. If it's your house and you have an apartment downstairs and a space upstairs and your family all lives there, I don't think that violates anything. But if other people are renting separate space in that house, that violates the township's ordinances. So there is what we'll call the barn structure with the apartment in it. There's the basement apartment in the house, and then there's another housing space on the 2nd floor. And from the pictures, it's a very nice house. Everything that was done well. The apartment in the barn, other than it was cluttered by your tenant, who was somewhat of a hoarder, it's a nice apartment. The space in the basement of the house was nice, well done. But the sense of it was, and your letter would corroborate it, as you are using this as additional rental income to supplement your retirement and continue to pay to live there. I also had a concern that immediately outside the door to this thing were pigs, like adjacent to the house. I had other concerns about how many septic systems there are, what's the wiring, what's the assessment. This may kill your homestead exemption. So there are other issues that were not resolved. But after hearing the testimony that I heard, I found that the plaintiffs had maintained their proof that you violated both sections of the township ordinance. I was not prepared to make you rip all this stuff out, which is what the original request was. I haven't seen the proposed order. It was abridged for the court. as to something less than that, but essentially that it's your house, but you can't rent anything else out. So, Mr. Spiegel, you indicated you wish to present some evidence here.
Some evidence on those two topics, and we'll try to be relatively brief.
Ms. Gushwat, what's your position regarding that?
On that, I understand that Mr. Spiegel is coming in late, and I certainly understand, his desire to zealously represent his client. However, I would object to the admission of any more evidence. This is, I believe the time to admit evidence has passed. Certainly, if Mr. Spiegel would like to take that up with circuit court at an appeal level, that would, I think, be a more appropriate place to do that.
So, yeah, we had the trial, and now you're asking to present the evidence I should have heard at trial, I guess.
Well, may I
So,
respond briefly?
yes.
Yeah, I guess my response would be kind of, but as I said, it took me a little bit, but I did find the whole recording, right?
Mhm.
And listen to it all. Obviously, there's things that, as an attorney, if I was there, I'd be, objecting to this or doing that or the other thing. I'm not trying to revisit that, rip evidence out of the record that's there. I might have not let certain things in, but it's there now. But I do recall you saying that I want to hear additional information before I make a ruling on what the proper order is here. And so I'm not expecting Your Honor to necessarily go back and say nothing happened here, nothing to see. But certainly, I mean, one, when we're talking about what should be done to this house, again, I don't know if it's moot yet still from what their order they're proposing, or if they're still would argue for more. But I think it's certainly worth considering what's actually happening in the house. I didn't hear that evidence really fleshed out entirely. And Your Honor, as I recall in the recording, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I listened again this morning, kind of said, I'm out of time. I can't take any more hearing today on this stuff. And I don't really think that they had a chance to put everything they want to talk about out there. To be fair to Your Honor, I think there maybe were certain things that didn't necessarily the most relevant to that inquiry that were talked about instead, but I think we still need to get that out of there if the house issue is an issue, ongoing issue, so you can craft an appropriate order.
Well, what I did say was the court needs more information before I enter the compliance order.
Right.
And so you're requesting to provide more information before I enter the compliance order.
Precisely. So you can craft an order that appropriately addresses the real circumstances as they sit. That's what I'm asking, yes.
All right. I did open the door for this. This would be, I guess, the fact that the violation's been found is not being revisited. The question is, what's the remedy? And I guess we can address that. Also, it may flesh out something in the event there is an appeal. But yes, you may present evidence on your input for the court before I fashion what the remedy is.
Thank you, I appreciate that. With that, if I may, call Mr. McLean to the stand.
Yeah, please. Please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm any testimony you're about to give in this matter will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Absolutely.
Yes, all right.
Give your full name for the court's record, ma'am.
Mary Ann McLean,
And where do you live currently?
15271 Money Lake Road, Three Rivers,
How long have you lived there?
since 1990.
Were you the first occupant at the structure that's currently at the home?
Yes,
Have you done any major remodels since you built the, I'm gonna call it the main house? I know there was a couple structures at issue. We'll call it the main house for the record.
no,
Okay. I know there's been a little talk about this already in prior hearing, but just can you describe briefly for the court each level of the home, what it looks like, the main house?
well, the main floor that my husband and I occupy has one bedroom and living room, kitchen, well, kind of a small dining area. The upstairs was my son's bedroom and two of my son's bedrooms, and we call it the Rumpus room, which is over the garage. And the lower level was finished off a little bit later, a few months maybe after we moved in, because my folks were ill, and made it into a barrier-free type place where we could care for my folks. That's the walkout.
Was the house built as permitted, to your understanding?
Yes.
And I'll take them each in turn, I suppose. Does the second floor area, does that have a separately keyed ingress and egress from the rest of the house?
It does. No key though.
Okay. What is that we're talking about?
Because it's kind of a sprawling house and our windows don't open or big enough for egress, we put in like a back stair where people could, if there was a fire, get out.
Okay, so you're describing a fire escape.
Yes.
Okay, but it doesn't have a key.
No.
Okay. And the basement, does that have a separately keyed ingress and egress?
It has both. It has a sliding patio door, but it doesn't have a key. And we've got an egress in the back, which was for the bedroom.
Okay, and again, back to, there's no separate key to get into the
No, absolutely
area.
not. No.
Okay. And I'll take them each in turn. Is the basement partitioned off from accessing the rest of your house in any fashion?
No.
Is the second floor area partitioned off from accessing the rest of your house in any fashion?
No.
Okay, all one thing.
All one thing.
All right. I know there was some testimony from my review. I know I wasn't here, but of your daughter living there back in the 2017 timeframe. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
Okay. But what I want to focus on now, though, is anyone else other than your husband and you live there since 2019?
We've allowed family.
Okay. Can you tell the court who some of those people are?
Gary's cousin Sandy Hummel has stayed more than once when she's been in between selling park models in Florida. When the hurricane went through, her park model was destroyed. She stayed with us for a little while then. And this spring also, she sold her one she had at Bear Lake Campground, I think. There was a little time frame where she needed somewhere. So again, she was more than welcome and stayed with us.
Did you charge her rent either of those times?
No.
Okay. Anyone else come to mind?
Chapmans.
Who are the
Gary and
Chapmans?
Regina Chapman stayed when they had a house fire in Moore Park in their home. And they stayed with us while they were making the home where they could go back in and dwell again. It took some time.
Okay. Did you charge Ms. Chapman rent?
No.
Okay. Anyone else that stayed there since 2019 who's lived with you and your husband?
That I can think of.
Okay. There was some discussion I heard on the record last time, again, wasn't here, but there was some discussion about a traveling nurse. Do you know who that individual is?
That would be Alice Hutchins.
Okay, Alice Hudgens. And does she live at what we're calling the main house?
No.
Okay. Does she stay overnight at the main house?
She does not.
Okay. Has she stayed there at all in 2025?
No.
Okay, so what is Alice Hudgens' connection to the main house?
Stores things there because she's a traveling ultrasound technician. She spent a year in New York and now she's in Iowa. She's under contract there, so she wanted her things in a very safe temperature. It's her family heirlooms mostly that are there.
Okay. There was some testimony, I believe, offered from your husband, or maybe it was vis-a-vis Mr. Coolman, from your husband's statements that there is money that's accepted for that service. Is that accurate?
Much disgruntled, but yes, we have.
Okay. But is she living at that house?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Do you intend to rent your main home out to random people on the street, either the basement, the second floor?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So if the court enters an order saying you can't rent your home out in piece by piece, unless you get made a duplex or triplex or something like that, you're not here to fight about that.
No, I'm not here to fight about that.
Okay. The other building that's been discussed, it's been, I think, called the barn dwelling at various times. I'm just going to refer to it to the barn dwelling, okay? Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
She just can't record head nods very well. Okay. So the barn dwelling is on your property.
Yes.
Are there other structures on the property other than the barn dwelling and the main house?
Yes, there's a hay barn and machinery storage that we put in 1998.
Okay. Anybody living in those units ever?
No,
Let's talk a little bit more about the barn dwelling. When was that built?
before our house in 92.
Okay. Did it always have a separate living unit inside the structure or not?
Yes,
Okay. What type of features did that living unit have?
toilet, shower, kitchen, doors on both ends.
Is it a studio or does it have a separate bedroom?
Studio.
Okay. Have you made any major renovations to that space since you first built what we're calling the barn dwelling?
I was forced to when we had a fire in the barn, but it was a small fire, no structure involved, and we did have to replace some of the not walls really, but fixtures, I guess you would call them,
Okay.
from smoke damage and water damage.
When did that happen?
Oh, probably 15 years ago, and I'm not good with dates. It was on a Christmas day, I remember that. We had every fire department in the world.
Did you expand the size of the footprint of that unit at all in the barn dwelling?
No,
Okay. Was anybody hurt in that instance?
no.
I know there was some question about this last time, so I want to just look at a couple documents, not a lot. There's one document here. This is Defendant's proposed exhibit A, if I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
Okay, ma'am, have you seen this document before?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell the court what it is?
Actually, the very first thing we did on our property was through the health department to get permits for wells and septic systems.
Okay. Was there any provision in this document regarding the, what we're calling the barn dwelling?
Yes.
Okay.
It has its own separate tank and drain field from the house, and it was put in before.
There's separate septic systems between the main house and this barn dwelling. If we go to the last page of that document, there's a drawing. There's a printed off drawing and there's sort of a handwritten drawing on the bottom of that. See that?
Yes, I do.
Do you know who drew that up?
I did.
Okay. The thing that says barn dwelling tank, 500 feet.
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
Okay. Did you draw that up and then provide it to the health department, or did you do that after you got the document back?
No, I did it in the presence of Lee Zimmerman.
And the court may know this, but I'm just asking, who's Lee Zimmerman?
I do believe he's still employed with the health department. I don't know what his actual title is, but he goes out and perks the soil and he tells you where to put your well and tanks and everything, where it's safe.
I think his title is sanitarian.
Uh,
Sounds like the court's familiar with Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes, I am.
Your Honor, asked to, excuse me, admit plaintiff's, or not plaintiff's, defendant's proposed exhibit A.
This was a question I had at the previous hearing, where there are two wells, where there are two septic systems. Her testimony was there were two septic systems. I think there's one well, but this is, I'm looking for a date on it.
There's, if you turn to the second page, Your Honor, I'll offer.
Well permit 11/9/92.
I think that might be a 4, but it could be a 9, but yes, that's what I was referring to.
I don't think it was 42, 11,992. Ms. Gushwent, your input regarding the exhibit?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to object on two reasons. First being authentication. I believe that she testified that she did submit this. However, Mr. Zimmerman is not here to testify whether or not that was drawn before or after. And second, on relevance, the soil erosion and sediment pollution control application, it doesn't trump zoning, and quite frankly, I'm not sure it has any relevance on the issues at hand.
If I may respond, Your Honor.
Yes.
Well, I think respectfully, Ms. Gushman's first point that goes to the weight, not the admissibility of the evidence. It'd be great if we had Ms. Zimmerman here. I suppose if they wanted to attack the document, but at least indicia of the document, that it's an official document. Now, the witness did testify she did write in the handwritten portion at the end that is relevant to the question, but she said she did it in the presence of the inspector, and this is all signed off. If there's some, again, doubt about the validity or I guess the weight of that, the court can take it its weight as it wants, but as the court also mentioned, you wanted to see this document, and here it is. As the second objection, Your Honor, I have to disagree with that. I'm a little, is it not the authenticity? Help me again, what's the second?
Relevance.
The
Yeah,
relevance?
this
Well,
is-
yeah, okay, yes. Yeah, I'll respond to the relevance objection, fair enough. Well, I think the court has already said you wanted to see this document, so it's certainly relevant to the court is about what's going on there. It talks about having these separate fields. I'm not saying it trumps what happened out there as far as the zoning, but what it does tell you is that, yes, this was at least set up the way, and I know Your Honor was concerned about the capacity. Is there too much going into one place? So at least this does answer that question.
I'll admit it for that purpose. It does go to weight rather than admissibility, but I do think that this is a reliable document. The defendant is the possessor of it. And her testimony was that this was permitted. Part of their whole argument is that they were allowed to go down this path by the township, either previous administrations or current ones. Although Sheila knew she was like treading the edge of the border, but I'll admit it. And it does show that the property was permitted for 2 separate septic systems. So obviously they would have known, the township would have known there was another dwelling in the, what we'll call the barn dwelling. Now, in your letter that made it to me, that made it into the file, you state, my husband built, own, and operate a farm in Fabius Township. We built with permits, completed with inspections, and got occupancy permits for a living space in one of our buildings, as well as our Miles Kid Home. What is the Miles Kid Home? Is that the residence?
Yes, that's our house. It came like with walls pre-assembled.
All right, so the barn and that apartment were built before the kit home was constructed.
Hoyt built the barn.
All right, and so the kit home is your house.
Yes.
Okay. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
And perhaps to Your Honor's second point, I do have another document, just one more exhibit I'd like to approach, Defense Exhibit B. Okay, ma'am, I've handed you a document that has 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, can you tell the court what this document is?
It's our very first building permit. We installed a mobile home. We were allowed to keep for a year. Temporarily, it left at the end of that year. And our first barn, which was for dwelling and storage.
Okay, and is that the barn
Dwelling.
dwelling structure we've been referring to just the last few minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So there's some discussion about what you just mentioned here on the first page, the building permit. If we turn to the next page, what's that document?
That's
that
the
page.
actual permit that we got for our barn slash dwelling that we paid for, because it was part dwelling and not just barn.
Okay. And then the next page, it says plumbing permit. Do you see that page?
I do. That is the plumbing permit for the dwelling part of the barn.
And then the next page can tell the court what that drawing is.
What I do in the presence of Mr. Knighton, he wanted to know kind of, and I know it's, looks like a kindergartner, but that's how we did things. Kind of where the animals would be, where the dwelling would be, and where my husband's shop would be.
And is that in fact the general layout of the barn dwelling structure?
Still is to this day.
Okay. And was this document or this page of this submitted with, I see it looks like a staple in the left upper corner of this copy.
That's all.
Was it submitted with another document to your knowledge or another page?
I think so. I don't know.
I'll note the plumbing permit has sort of a torn off corner in that same area. Do you see that?
I do, and a long time ago.
Is that,
I
do they
have
have
the
any
original.
association? I know it's been over 30 years. I was 8 at the time, but
I know I shouldn't use staples. I'm learning that now.
okay,
I
so
don't know.
not sure is what.
I'm not
It may have been stapled, it may not have been. Okay. But this drawing was submitted to the township.
Yes,
Okay. Now I move for the, in fact, I think the last 3 pages were talked about in the first hearing, but I don't think the top one was. But I move for the
No,
admission of this.
the
as-
others were, and the
Yeah.
drawing was admitted. We may be conflicting our exhibits with more than one exhibit A and more than one exhibit B.
Oh, I thought it was exhibit 1 and 2 last time. I thought you were.
The
claiming using
plaintiffs were
numbers.
1 and 2. The defendants would be A and B,
Right,
but I'm not sure, but will be A and B for this date.
right.
Your input, Ms. Gushwent, regarding exhibit B,
No objection.
or exhibit B is admitted.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions on, or a few more questions on this, ma'am. I did, so you noted already on the first page, it said dwelling and storage on the building permit. The electrical permit, do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And was that also annotated as a dwelling at the time you were applying for this electrical permit in 93?
It was Mr. Niken who typed this up and came with the barn dwelling.
Okay, this is his document.
This is his document.
Okay,
Mr. Hawley inspected him.
that would have been my next question. So I see Mr. Hawley's name. So your testimony is he came out and inspected this.
Oh, several times.
Okay. Didn't fail inspection.
None.
All right. And then if we turn to the plumbing permit, also dated from March 4th, 93. Was this typed up by Mr. Niken?
It sure was.
Okay. It's kind of torn off, but you can tell enough of it. Is Mr. Hawley also the inspector on that document?
Yes,
Okay. Did it pass the plumbing inspection?
yes, it did.
Okay. Did either of those gentlemen tell you couldn't use what we're calling the barn dwelling structure as a dwelling?
No,
Okay. There was noted this at the last time, so I want to, address it. If we turn to the last page, though, there's 3 areas you pointed out earlier. It says animals, tractor shop, farm office.
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
that is a yes.
Sorry, just those head nods don't record well. Is the area that says farm office the area of the dwelling space in this building?
Yes, it is.
Okay, why was it called an office in here but not a dwelling?
Mr. Niken, being the gentleman that he was curious about our farm operations and how we were gonna use it and what we were gonna do in our plans. And I said, well, the first thing I'll probably do is have my farm office out there so that I can have some peace and quiet away from the kids and everything. So that's how I wrote that there for our discussion.
Okay. I also note though that it says kitchenette, toilet, shower on the side.
Correct.
Okay. So did you convey to him that all those type of things would be in this space?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you convey an understanding to him that you were going to use it as a living space in some level?
Yes,
Okay. but there's, and I think to the judge's point too, there's some question about, the proximity of the animals. There's obviously a space that says animals on this barn, right?
Yes.
Okay, and if we have to break it down, I guess, do so, but since 2019, what kind of, well, I'll strike that. Let me ask this question first. Since 2019, have animals been in this space that says animals on the barn, living in it?
Not living.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
It's a little different too. I apologize, I forgot, but there were 3 stalls in the beginning, and you can see I've got marked off several doors. I made myself, I didn't, my husband made my she shop there, and it's heated and air conditioned, and that's what I use now for birthing my goats and sheep, because it's cold right now, and that's where they're born, is and where the heat is. But it's my she shop with linoleum and wallpaper, so it's just to get them through birth, and then they're out. And then there's still 2 stalls, one on each end. So we did away with the door in the middle.
Okay.
But other than that, it's exactly the way it is. But no, animals, we free range. Our animals are out. I don't want to clean up after them daily, so they're out, not in the barn.
So there's some limited use, as you described.
Yes, they're birthed
Okay.
in my she shop.
You've touched on an issue I didn't ask about, but I guess I'll get to now. There's dashes at various outer walls of this barn, what we're calling the barn dwelling. Do you see those?
There were 3 sliding barn doors, and there were 3 stalls, but we never utilized it. And
So if I understand right, I see 1, 2, 3 in this area by animals at the top of it.
mhm,
Is that a yes?
yes, that's a yes.
Okay, those were doors,
Those were doors.
and you're saying one of those doors isn't there anymore.
Correct.
Okay, there's another one to the left, a larger one. What is that?
That is the big sliding door. The whole end of the barn almost opens. I think it's a 12-foot door wide, maybe.
Okay, below that, in the area tractor shop, it looks like there's a smaller door. Is that
It's a
what's going on?
3-foot service door on the east side, which you can kind of see. And then on the north side, there's a rolling door, Sturgis door put up.
Okay,
over the
And-
door.
I may have this wrong way around from the cardinal direction. So is that what says roll up door at the bottom of the drawing?
That's what it, yep.
Okay,
that's it.
and then I see, I think 2 entrances, ingress, egress on what's the farm office dwelling space,
Correct.
one on each side. Is that what it
That
looks
is
like?
correct.
Other than one of the doors going away on the animal section, any of those ingress, egress points been changed since you built this?
They have not.
Okay. It's not shown on here, so I'll ask, is there any access from the farm dwelling area to the animal area of this structure?
No,
Is there any access, I don't know if it's an issue, but any access from the farm office area to the tractor shop area of this building?
no.
Okay. I know there was a picture talked about last time, and the court had a fair question about it even today, yet still, about maybe a trough being outside of this area. I don't live there. What, is there anything outside, immediately outside of the farm dwelling area that's a trough or otherwise?
My husband had brought up the hog feeder from, we have what we call hog heaven, and it's the back 4 acres of the southwest corner of our property. It's kind of lower. And we bring the feeder up to fill it. And then he drives it back to give to the pigs.
Okay.
So that's why it was sitting there. We
Are-
don't
are
bring
the-
pigs up?
Are there hogs in the corral anywhere around this structure? In the last 6 years at all?
No.
Okay. I did notice a fence though. Is there any type of animal that's in that, what I guess I would call a corral or otherwise outside? What if anything
It's
is
used
in that
more of a
area?
runway. To get them, because we intensive graze, we run them from one place to another without letting them in the yards. So there is a fence there. And we did have a lot of vermin problems, so it's a 6-foot welded wire fence to try to keep.
You said are we talking about goats now or pigs?
Well, at any given time, it can be all kinds of different animals I use a runway for, because we still have horses,
Okay,
cattle, sheep, goats,
so
no pigs now.
you bring them up there, they exercise, but they're not
I
hanging
vet-
out.
I don't hang out. I vet them when they're up there, because that's where my confinement things are,
Okay,
stanchion type things.
let me ask this. there's been already some testimony about people who've lived in this farm dwelling unit. I just want to focus, I don't want to talk about 2017, but who's lived in this farm dwelling unit since 2019?
Colleen McPherson.
Okay, and I think the court, again, I don't want to rehash too much, but the court's already familiar. There was I think a landlord tenant proceeding this year about her.
I made a mistake and I let a homeless lady move in who was waiting for her apartment. I should not have done it.
Okay. Was she paying you rent?
She never paid anything, but Mr. Coleman actually helped me and taught me kind of how to get her out by doing the eviction and things. She pulled out all the stops to stay as long as she possibly humanly could.
That subject was disputed. The tenant claimed the rent was $1,000 a month. That was never actually resolved. I think at some point, Ms. McLean set rent at $1,000 a month, not believing that she would ever actually collect it. But ostensibly, it was rented by the tenant for $1,000 a month. I'd have to go back and refresh my memory. My recollection was some money was tendered before it began as a termination of tenancy, and Ms. McLean's right. It took quite some doing to actually get her out of the premises.
Thank you. Yeah, and I obviously wasn't at that whole proceeding at all, so you know the history better than me, Your Honor. Couple more questions on this farm dwelling topic. I know you said you only have the goats up there for a limited amount of time when they're birthing, et cetera, but let me ask, were there ever animals living in the animal section, even if it was limited, and people living in the farm dwelling section?
Not at the same time, never.
Okay. The court said a couple times, let's just, I guess, put it on the table. How do you use this farm dwelling section? Are you trying to generate rent, or how are you using this farm dwelling section when you are using
Generate
it?
help for the farm.
Okay. So, and I think the court touched on a little bit last time, they provide labor, you provide somewhere
Where to stay.
to stay. It didn't work out with Ms. McPherson at all, it sounds like. You said this is a studio, no actual bedroom on it.
Correct.
Okay. I'm aware of there were two individuals staying there in 2017 from the prior testimony. There was Ms. McPherson in 2019. Have you ever had more than two individuals in this unit?
No.
Okay. If the court entered an order that you can't rent this unit and can only use it for farm labor, is that something you can live with?
Yes,
Is that how you've been using it?
that's how we've used it.
Okay.
Farm labor is a rental. If they're living there in exchange for labor, that's a tenancy. And they're paying rent by labor. And they've been trying to finesse that question. Her letter that made it into the file no decision yet from the court as to what the township proposes violates my civil and constitutional rights. This would essentially end our ability to farm or survive without housing help. What does that mean?
My husband and I had multiple health issues, and at any time, we may have to go to Cleveland Heart Center for 2 weeks, or U of M. I've had multiple heart attacks.
And, we're all
we need
about the
help.
same age range, but what does this mean? It would end our ability to farm or survive without housing help. What that means to me is you need extra income. But I don't know, what does that mean?
Doesn't mean income, it means a place where I don't want people in my home, so having them in the barn. If we do have to run to the hospital for however amount of time, someone there that can care for the livestock. It's not easy these days finding someone who,
Well, I don't disagree with that. I saw some Facebook posts or some other things in the context of the earlier case where you were soliciting somebody to come live there. And there was some interest, and I don't know exactly how it worked out. So what do you want? You want the ability to have somebody live in the barn in that apartment, and it's not a kitchenette, it's a kitchen. A nice one. And so you want someone to be able to live there to assist you and your husband in the continued operation of your farm.
that is correct.
Live there under what terms?
It's always been kind of just labor in exchange for housing. Unless they do. We're fair people, an inexorbitant amount of labor, then we have stipend them with payments. Generally, it's we give them a half a beef or a hog, or something, products from the farm, kind of a homestead.
All right.
Let me, oh, I'm
Now,
sorry, Daniel.
Housing farm workers in ag zone is allowed, according to this letter. They falsely claim we house 5 or more migrants. False. Never. Only Americans. I guess American can be migrant. But what does that mean? That Americans have lived there?
That's a poor choice of words. I have trouble with etiquette in today's world, what's
Yes.
proper or not proper, but I'm not against having a migrant legal, I would want, but I wouldn't know how to go about doing that. So it's always been local people. First time I ever did the Facebook was whenever that post you saw.
Well, all right, so your testimony was no one's lived there since 2019, but this would disagree with that. So who's been staying out there as farm labor? How many different sets of people have lived in there?
3 maybe over the course of the years, not a lot.
If I can ask just a clarifying question, the court asked about since 2019. Is that change your
That's
answer?
COVID. That's COVID.
Just before COVID.
I'm terrible with dates. I apologize. And the last heart attack took some of my faculties, not that there was much, but I'm gonna stick with maybe 3.
Since COVID?
I believe,
COVID would have been 2020.
20, right. I remember that because my second daughter was born like 2 weeks before everything shut down.
counting Colleen, because we have to count her.
Sure.
Really hasn't been anybody in there, has there?
Well, it's a fair follow-up
I
question by the court.
apologize.
You said 3, so I mean, he's just one.
Well, if you haven't had anybody in there, then why do you say we can't continue to farm unless we have somebody in there? So a lot of this is, you're right, there's some hearsay and some unclear evidence, but I think somebody had lived in there beyond Miss McPherson, either as a quote unquote tenant or as a farm labor. And I told you on those other, you need a lease. You get somebody in there with no lease, no conditions, no security deposit. It's very hard to get them out of there, as you learned.
I learned.
But we'd had a previous back in 2017. And so you were a little sheepish when you called Mr. Coolman and said, I let the camel get their nose under the tent and they're back in there. So I made a finding, and I believe that it's based, some people have been living in there other than Miss McPherson since 2020. I guess we'll
It
go.
is possible. Rick and Sue Hill, they were in their 80s. He's since passed. They stayed there a few months, maybe. He did all of the mowing, even though it took him 15 minutes to get on the mower with his hips and everything. And he ended up passing away from cancer. They stayed in the barn, and I think that was probably after COVID. I apologize.
All
I'm
right,
not what I used to be. But it was Rick and Sue Hill. And she still lives in the area.
all right. I kind of got you off track there. Mr. Spiegel, I'll let you get back, and maybe those were questions, Miss.
No,
Fishman
those are fair,
asked, but
fair clarifying questions. I just have maybe one or two more. I don't have too much more. I think a point that's been raised by the judge, and from what I heard in the previous hearing, there's some maybe concern that there's too many people living in this space or maybe other spaces in general. Have you ever had 4 or 5 people living in this farm dwelling area?
Oh, no,
Okay, and you'd agree that's not appropriate. You're not trying to do that.
appropriate, no.
Okay. If the court enters an order limiting it to 1 or 2 people, would you protest?
No,
I don't think I have anything further, Your Honor.
all right, Ms. Fishman, does this raise questions for the township?
I just have a couple really quick. Do you have a copy of your migrant farm permit from the state?
I never had migrant.
You've never had, okay. And do you understand that a migrant doesn't necessarily have to be from another country? They can just be somebody who's seasonal and temporary?
I didn't know that. But
Yeah, so, so you've never had a migrant farm permit from the state, correct?
correct.
Okay. And on your building permit, that was the 12/17/2025 Exhibit B, that was for a pole barn and a mobile home, correct?
Yes,
And the pole barn, was that for dwelling or storage?
oh,
Okay, and the mobile home, was that for dwelling and storage as well?
living, dwelling.
Okay, it doesn't say dwelling and dwelling and storage under the proposed use. One is for dwelling, one is for storage, is that correct?
I guess it's worded that way.
Okay, all right, that was my understanding too, thank you. And you indicated that in the barn in question, that you did away with a door in the middle?
What do we-
You indicated
Oh,
during.
between the stalls on the south end, yes.
Okay, all right, and can you please describe for me the wall between the farm office and the animals and tractor shop?
It's a double wall. We're very fire conscious or whatever you want to call it. It's double 5/8 drywall, but it's a 4x6 pole barn construction.
Mhm.
And there's double 5/8 and there's steel on that side that faces my husband's shop.
Okay, and do you have the fire inspection report for that?
Not with me.
Okay, all right, thank you. No further questions.
Nothing further from me, Your Honor.
All right. Oops. That's what is labeled in there as a pig pen, which is immediately outside the dwelling portion of the home. There appears to be a little porch or deck, pig pen placed right next to the back porch. That caused some concern for the court. Your testimony was that no animals get penned in there. They just keep the feeder in there to fill it and then
That
move it.
fence is to keep Colleen McPherson's pit bull in her area.
Even
It's
worse,
kind of temporary.
I never knew there was a pit bull as part of that as well.
Oh, I kept that.
So you still have the dog?
Yes.
No. So other animals, pigs, goats, don't get kept in this part of the property,
No, and you can see the mini split on the side of the barn. That's where the other door used to be.
right here.
Yes.
I just like that plain old fashioned air conditioner. So there's a door right here and you took that door out
There were three and you
All
can't
right.
see the one to the far
and
left.
that opens into the tractor
That opens into a stall.
in the tractor and storage
In
portion.
the animal part, more of a cat stall than anything
All
nowadays.
right. And then where's this porch?
Right there.
I mean, is it right outside the dwelling
Yes.
portion of the premises?
Yes.
All right. Anybody have any questions about that?
That didn't generate any questions for me, Your Honor.
All right,
None, Your Honor.
okay, you may step down, thank you.
Oh, yeah, there's no further evidence we want to put on today. Thank you.
All right. So Ms. Gushwent, you had proposed a more limited compliance order than the original one that was submitted. And I was concerned about simply tearing everything out of there. I have learned from the additional evidence that there was Ms. McLean testified that there were 2 drain fields and they were permitted, but Exhibit A would confirm that. I believe there were pictures of these electrical permit and the plumbing permit as part of the exhibits from the plaintiff, but they're easier to see. That address 15271 Mooney Lake Road. Barn used as dwelling. Barn used as dwelling. Approved by John Nyken, approved by the building inspector. So this wasn't something they did secretly in the dark of night. That was built actually before the house was built. But it isn't really a farm office. It's a very nice apartment. And it was hard to get a handle on everything. You didn't ask much about the dwelling in the house, but the pictures that were provided looked like somebody was dwelling in the different parts. And they stressed that I want to stress, if it's your own family, you can have as many people as you want. They can all live in your house and you're lucky if you get that situation. Something that hasn't been addressed, and it maybe was touched on, the township now has an Airbnb ordinance. Many townships, including Fabius, have limited homeowners' ability to rent short-term rentals. Fabius is home to Pleasant, Clear, Corey, or what's in the other, Little Pleasant, multiple lakes with cottages on them. And there were issues about how many short-term Airbnb licenses would be allowed in the township. Ms. Gushwent or Mr. Kuhlman, does that play into this at all?
I don't think that it would, Your Honor, because my understanding is for that, it would be more of like a rental of the full property. And that's kind of not what was going on here. It was more of a single family dwelling being used as more of a duplex. That's what I would say. Doug, you think?
Right, the ordinance is very specific, but the short-term rental has to be the primary house. It has to be the entire house. You can't have a level of the house be your own private house and you rent out another portion, and it cannot be in any accessory building or camper or anything like that. So it would not qualify for a short-term rental.
All right, so this is not a short-term rental. And again, I didn't make a finding that it was. The question was, would the change of that ordinance affect this? And I guess the answer is no. So let's look at the actual section of the ordinance that you contend is in violation. We did this before. Let me see if I can find it. I believe it's included in the pleadings.
Connor, while you're searching, if I might,
Yes,
a simple migrant farm permit from the state would solve, I believe, Mrs. McLean's issue. It would trump our zoning ordinance as far as an accessory dwelling in the barn or like a rental unit in the barn. I think that would kind of solve everybody's problems here.
great. In an agriculturally zoned area, they are allowed to have migrant farm housing. And migrant doesn't mean non-American. It means people that travel and stay for the crop season or otherwise. So there's a state form whereby if they got a migrant housing permit, and I'm sure this housing would meet any inspection. I can't conceive that it wouldn't. I've seen a lot worse that's got housing permits. So if they had a migrant housing permit, they could have farm help reside in the barn dwelling.
Exactly, and I think that's going to be a solution that makes everybody here happy.
All right.
Just a brief response, Ron. Certainly, I think that's something that makes sense to pursue, but I think we still contend that given the prior permits, that at least with maybe some rational limitations, as the court may imply or apply, one or two people living in that space was permitted and is allowed. But I have no problem. Why not try?
Well, that's the, otherwise I'm just parsing a solution out of thin air. It's like, well, you can have two people, but you can have three people, and
well, not totally. I mean, again, if we had five people in there, that's going to overload things, and that's, you know, I can understand the court saying, look, this is a studio, this is built for one person, maybe two. I don't want to see 4 or 5 people living
well,
there.
I think what they've been seeking is a couple, a retired couple or other people that maybe wanted to give out in the country to come stay there for housing and then provide farm services. And that would certainly qualify under the Michigan migrant housing exception. So that could solve the problem for the barn dwelling. I was somewhat taken, not somewhat, I was taken aback when I read the proposal. It was filed before, it was filed in September, and the hearing was in October. Their proposal was to rip everything out of there. And I was uncomfortable with that. So I think we are at a place where we can come to a common ground. Also, I don't know exactly what the truth is. I know of the 2017 case, and I know the case was Miss McPherson. She was asking for emergency housing money and $1,000 a month. And if somebody had come up with that money, the McLeans would have accepted it. That's rent. And when someone moves into your premises under an employment contract, that's a tenancy. And we've had several of these. We had one at Camp Eberhard. We had one at Green Valley Campground, where that very sort of thing has become an issue. All right, so having that thought in mind, Ms. Geschwint, what's your proposal?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would propose that, very similar to what, as I stated at the beginning, the main dwelling unit on the property is considered a single family home, cannot be rented out unless it's rented out in its entirety with a short-term rental permit. And then no person is permitted to sleep or live in or sleep in the accessory building, RV unit, or makeshift building absent a permit from the state of Michigan for the migrant farm and the inspection. And if there's any violation of the above, that the township would file a motion to show cause why the defendant should not be held in contempt.
All right. So it's your contention, Gary and Mary, that you're not renting any part of your house to anybody right now.
No.
It's just you and your husband and your children and grandchildren may come and stay there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Gary, you agree with that?
Well, with one exception, I didn't hear anything about friends.
Well,
You know, I have friends out of state, who stay with us from.
all right, well, let's talk about that. I have friends and they come to visit and they may stay at my house. That I don't know where the line is, if they stay there for a week or they stay there for 6 months. As long as you're not charging rent, I think that you're fine. All right, Mr. Spiegel, the migrant farm permit would solve the problem. I don't know what you have to do to get one of those. Do you have any insight as to that?
I think that there's something online that you can go to. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, they have some specific housing requirements, size requirements, which aren't nearly as restrictive as.
Well, I've been through it with some of our local renters. They have very strict inspection protocols. I believe the Richmonds rented some farm housing and they were very rigorously inspected. They had some farm housing at Memory Lane Mobile Home Park. And again, they were vigorously and rigorously inspected. But I don't see any reason why this property would not pass such an inspection.
And yeah, if I just may respond briefly to that, Your Honor. Again, I think we're certainly happy to try, but I don't know enough about that to say how easy or not easy that will be
Yeah, I
in the
don't either.
circumstances. So, I mean, I guess I had two changes to the new proposed order. One of it, I think it should be completely non-controversial, one of which obviously is. I would just add to the first part, to the extent the main dwelling is able to be redesignated a duplex or triplex, conditions this order will not apply. Subsections are designated. I don't know if there's any plans to do that. I just don't want, if that were to happen in the future, okay, you're violating the order when they've done what they said you can do, which is go get it made a duplex, right? I think that shouldn't.
Well, if they wish to have it declared a duplex, I'm not sure how you do that zoning wise,
It would be just a special use.
Yeah.
special use permit.
So I'm just saying, if
They
that
allow
were to
a
happen,
duplex in the agricultural district, they don't allow a triplex also.
You could allow a duplex.
She wanted to go through the permitting process. She could do her second floor as one and the main floor as another and have a duplex there as long as she went through the permitting process.
And that would give her the authority even to rent the other portion?
Yes,
but again, there's no plans for that, but I would
Yeah.
just add that to it, just so in case somebody decided to do that in the future, we wouldn't have to come back here and say, I anticipate from the testimony, no, try that, but you never know. As I always say, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and someone's reading it and they go, well, that's not what we said. But I guess I will continue to say, while we would try to do this migrant farm worker, our position would be as to number 2, except that one individual may be permitted to reside in the barn dwelling on a seasonal basis based upon the prior permitting that was
Can
granted.
you accept that?
Your Honor, I don't think that I think that that's not exactly the intention, as we saw with the building permit, that the pole was for storage, the pole barn was for storage. The mobile home was for dwelling. That was the original intent of the permit. I believe even Ms. McLean testified to that. I think that the modifications and the upgrades to it, if it had legal non-conforming status, I think that those have since been gone. There was a fire in there, there was damage, things have been replaced, things have been rebuilt. I think that if there was legal non-conforming status, it's lost.
Let me address that briefly. if I may. yes, there's some ambiguity to the first page of Exhibit B, I'll grant you, but then the next two pages go on to say barn dwelling. It's very
Yes.
clear. It says barn dwelling. There's no ambiguity about that. And then you have, of course, page 4, which has it all written out. There's some ambiguity because it's called an office, and then there's things that are clearly not part of an office. But as far as the non-conforming use, and that's why it's listed in the testimony, of course, I think Ms. Grisham knows, yes, you can't expand the non-conforming use when you go back and do those repairs and stuff, but the testimony was, yeah, I kept it the same thing. I didn't change the dimensions, the same, like for like went in there. So I would disagree in that sense that has been lost by that. As long as you are simply repairing what's already been permitted, that's allowed. You cannot expand. That's the law. So anyway, that's the one place I think we're asking Your Honor to have to unfortunately make a decision today. We disagree still on that point.
And I would just make one more note that it's still placarded as unsafe for human habitation.
And why is that?
I would have to defer to Mr. Coleman.
Back on the first inspection, our building inspector, which is retired, but is still alive, indicated that his review of that space would not pass the codes for habitation. I don't know what those are because I'm not a building inspector, but certainly if we needed to come back, we could get Mr. Smaling here. He is still in the area and still alive, unlike the rest of the inspectors that are on this list.
But if it was permitted in 92.
Well, I'm troubled by it. Administrative law and these areas of law are the kinds of things that generate ill will in the general public. They aren't by state statute. They're by township ordinance. And you have non-elected people like Mr. Kuhlman, Mr. Schmaling, who are agents of the township board, who are telling people what you can or can't do. So Mr. Schmaling placarded, whatever that means. It means you put a sign on the door that says this place is unsafe for human habitation. We don't know why. He isn't there anymore. And somebody somewhere said this house is unfit for human habitation. He wasn't elected by anybody. I don't know the reasons why he decided it was unsafe for human habitation. And that is a big roadblock in the middle of the road. And I didn't order it. I have authority from the Michigan Constitution. And I'm elected by the voters in St. Joseph County to hold this position. And I'm their enforcer. They can do anything unless a judge says you have to do it. So this guy says, and I'm not being it pejoratively because I've seen some places that need to be condemned, many of them. But then ultimately the judge has to affirm the condemnation. For example, if your house is condemned and you move back into it and say, too bad, I want to live here. They ask me for an order to prohibit you from living there. And then the powers of contempt come into play, and the equitable powers in zoning cases give the court authority to do something. But I'm uncomfortable that he just posted it as not fit for human habitation without knowing why. I don't even know how they remedy it. I haven't found it to be unfit for human habitation. So how do we fix that?
So that's something the township wants to rely on. That was their proofs to do so. I didn't see that come in the first hearing or the second.
Fair enough. All right, we're not very far apart. And some of it is just somebody said this is the rule. Now, I'm not that smart, but I did go to law school and I passed the Michigan bar. And there are kinds of things that are illegal because they're bad in and of themselves. That's called malum in se. Murdering somebody is bad because it's bad. Stealing from somebody is bad because it's bad. Malum is Latin for bad, and in se means in and of itself. There are other kinds of things that are called malum prohibitum. They're only illegal because somebody said they're illegal. You have to have a certain square footage in your house to build a house. Well, who decided that? Somebody. So they made a rule that said you can't do that. So everything we're talking about here is malum prohibitum. It's in violation of the law because somebody made a law that says it's bad. No one's going to argue with the fact that it's bad to murder somebody or steal from someone or drive drunk or all the crimes I see every day. But these kinds of things are illegal because somebody decided they were illegal. And many of these things weren't even decided by statute. They're decided by code, administrative code, which is then adopted by the statute. And so you can't have anybody live here, but if you get a permit for farm residents, you can do it. So it's like you didn't jump over this little line here. Somebody says this place is unfit for human habitation. I didn't make such a finding because I didn't have any evidence that it was. And Mr. Kuhlman's been around. I've seen plenty of places that were unfit for human habitation. And prohibited people from living there and tore things down and watch people get burned up because they violated my order not to reside there. So we're in agreement. The house shall be a single family dwelling unless at some point defendant or their successors petition to have this made into a duplex. And again, that's changing the rule. So the house is easy. It's their house and they can have family and friends stay there with them, provided they don't charge any rent. But to barn dwelling, and again, this goes way back. Mr. Niken's been long since passed. Mr. Dunlap's long past. I knew both of them, went to school with their kids, liked them both. They did things differently back then. They do it on the back of a piece of paper like that. And as the building inspector, Mr. Niken was also the township clerk for many years. They approved an electrical inspection with that as a dwelling. They approved a plumbing inspection with that as a dwelling. The health department allowed 2 septic systems to go in there with the assumption that that was going to be some sort of a dwelling. It wasn't really a farm office, and it isn't a farm office now. It's a nice little apartment. So regarding the barn dwelling, it went in there. As I said earlier, you didn't do it in secret. You did it with this plan that you were going to expand it into what you've done. There are some things in here that are problematic, but you knew as of 2017 that you weren't supposed to do this. And so when you called Mr. Kuhlman up in 25 or 24, whenever this thing started, it's like, well, I did what you told me not to do, and now I gotta try to get out of it. And that goes under the category of no good deed goes unpunished. But eventually that tenancy was terminated and you ended up with a big mess. So I will allow, I guess, 1 person to reside in there, or as many as permitted if you get a migrant farm permit. migrant housing permit. And if the premises are unfit for human habitation, those inspectors will not allow you to do it. I haven't been there. I know where you live. I haven't been in this barn. I've seen the pictures. Ms. Chapman, did you reside in the apartment in the barn or the basement of the house?
Basement of the house, but that was in 2006.
Yes, that was a long time ago. And you testified about that at the last hearing. All right. So I'm not sure this is very clear. So let's try to make it clear for the township and for the defendant. No one shall reside in the house except the defendants, their family, and guests, and no rent shall be charged. As I said, unless somebody applies for a duplex permit. Secondly, they may utilize what we've been referring to as the barn dwelling for migrant farm assistance if they have a migrant housing permit from the state of Michigan. As Ms. Gushwent stated, that trumps township law. The defendant says, well, I'm not sure I can get one of those, but I'd still like to have somebody live there. And then we're talking about one person or two. And it's the very thing that the plaintiff objected to. Ms. Gushwent, what language do you use regarding that?
What?
Regarding some temporary residence of the barn dwelling.
Oh, I indicated that no person is permitted to live or sleep in the, I'll say barn dwelling, absent a migrant farm permit from the state of Michigan.
All right, that's straightforward.
And then can we clarify on the RV unit or makeshift building? That no person be allowed to live in an RV unit or makeshift building?
Yes.
I think you can just leave that. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think that's been a thing.
I just want to make sure.
Well, and we've seen plenty of people living in RV units
Yes, we
and
have.
makeshift buildings.
Yeah, we don't contest that part.
Yeah, I don't think that's been an issue. All right, so what do you want? They want nobody in there absent a migrant housing permit from the state of Michigan.
Yeah, and again, I would say it's, again, whether the court thinks it's one, whether it's two, no more than that, certainly based on the testimony, that they are permitted based on the existing building permits and permits that have been granted to have, again, either one or two, as farm labor reside in that unit, or as so much as may be permitted by obtaining one of these migrant farm worker permits. So i.e., there's at least one. I don't know that they're gonna want more than one anyway. Again, I'm not familiar with the process of tell you on what I think will happen with all that. I would still encourage you to try to get one, and then maybe this all is not a headache at all, but I do have to defend and feel it's correct to say we have had those permits for 30+ years, as the court stated. And that was how it was done back then. It's not unusual.
Well, they were not occupancy permits. There's a difference between a building permit and an occupancy permit.
Unfortunately, after this amount of time, we don't have that, right?
Yes.
What if we set this out for 60 days? Mrs. McLean attempts to get the migrant permit or however many days. We come back and see if this is even an issue. Because
Do you
right
know how
now
long
we
it
could be.
takes? I just honestly.
I don't. We could set it out for 60 days and then just keep updated.
If for some reason we're not, it's. I know the wheels of bureaucracy turn slow.
Right.
It's
Right, I understand.
Well,
And
should it
certainly-
be like a Zoom status hearing? I'm just kind of
Yes,
thinking out
yes,
loud.
Zoom
here.
status hearing would be
Yeah,
great,
that would
because
be
we're
fine.
spinning our wheels and, we might be trying to decide something that's not even gonna matter. So if we set this out for a status in 60 days,
I don't object to that. I think they're willing to try to come into compliance.
Mhm.
The problem is it's finding a unicorn in a snowstorm to find appropriate tenant that would live in this housing for maybe they're out there. When I was a kid, my grandfather did that. He was a caretaker for a wealthy man's house and lived in an apartment on the premises. And that was his pay essentially. But they become at that point tenants.
We can certainly agree, Your Honor. Anybody living there should have some kind of lease that spells out exactly what.
Well, and Mr. Spiegel does landlord-tenant law. I have done some very difficult cases in landlord-tenant, and he could assist you with that. So I'm not objecting to that, but you're right. The state of Michigan bureaucracy doesn't move at the speed of the sound of loneliness. It can take a while, but at least we could do a status review to see whether she's applied for it and what this, and do it by Zoom rather than drag everybody back in here.
More than willing to do that, Your Honor.
All right.
I think that sounds great.
All right. So that takes us into 2026. And when I was a kid, I thought we'd be living on Mars and have a base on the moon by 2026, but we haven't even solved our problems here on Earth. Let's continue this to March 11th, 2026. Call it a Zoom status review. Set it at 1:15. Every odd numbered Tuesday, or odd numbered Wednesday are my zoning days. I had a 3 Rivers case this morning and I blocked out the whole afternoon for this. But this won't take us all afternoon. We'll either be on the path to solving it or not. All right, we did inch farther forward and I did request further information, and defendant provided further information. Some of it I've known, some of it I didn't. But basically, you just got to get in compliance with the rules and then you should be all right. And we're not all going to live forever. Someone's going to buy this property and it's going to be difficult for you to sell it with all these unresolved issues. So the time to resolve them is now. All right. So we've made some progress. We're closer to the finish line than we were. And we'll visit this further on March 11th, 2026 at 1:15. And Mrs. Yoder, hopefully you could see the benefit of having a lawyer help you with this. Your recent pleadings that you filed in your case were never served on the township. And so he doesn't have official notice of the hearing. He doesn't have notice of the date. And that's the kind of thing a lawyer can help you with, as opposed to somebody that's practicing law without a license. All right, we'll be in recess in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Have a good holiday.